Welcome to Bedtime Stories. The Cursed Serpent. Once upon a time, a woodcutter lived with his wife deep in the forest. The only thing they had ever wished was a child of their own, but sad to say, years passed and the couple had no children. One day, as the weather was turning cold and the last leaves fell from the trees, the woodcutter returned home from the forest with an extra stack of wood for their own hearth. As he lay his wood down by the fire, a golden serpent crawled out from between the twigs. The serpent slithered across the room and coiled himself at his wife's feet. And then the serpent spoke. Now in those days animals sometimes spoke, but they did not do this all the time, so the poor woman was startled when the serpent said, "If you will adopt me as your child, keep me warm and away from the wild, I'll be good and I'll be well, and good fortune will upon you dwell." The woodcutter's wife was overjoyed at the thought of a son, so the couple adopted the serpent and raised him as their son. And just as the serpent had promised, good fortune smiled upon the woodcutter and his wife. Years passed. The serpent grew into an enormous and hardy creature. One day, just as winter came to the land, the serpent said to his adoptive parents, "I want to marry." "We'll find you a lovely serpent," said the mother, but the serpent hissed. He had other ideas, you see. He said to the father, "I want to marry the king's daughter," he said. "Tomorrow you must go to tell the king the first wish to marry the princess." The woodcutters, of course, was reluctant, but his wife and the serpent begged him. "Father," said the serpent, "please give my message to the king, tell him about the good fortune will upon his kingdom dwell." So the next morning he set off for the palace. The nearer he came, the more worried he felt. The king was sure to be insulted and might hang the woodcutter for such a rude request. Then he remembered all the good fortune he owed through his son, and remembering this, he grew courageous and continued on his way. When at last he stood before the king, he said, "O great king, a serpent who is my adopted son wishes to marry your daughter." The king could not believe his ears. Many fellows had asked him for peculiar things, but this was stranger than most. Still, the king had a good sense of humor, and he decided to play along. "Very well, I'll grant my daughter's hand in marriage if your serpent son turns my entire royal orchard into gold." He thanked the king and hurried home, but when he told the serpent of the king's wild request, the serpent simply said, "Tomorrow go to the market and gather all the fruit stones you can find. Take these and scatter them in the king's orchard, and if, father, you do this well, good fortune will upon you dwell." So he did just as his adopted son had asked. Naturally he expected nothing to happen, but as he scattered the stones, he was amazed to see every single tree turn to gold, and every leaf upon the ground turned gold as well. When the king looked out his window and saw his shimmering orchard, he could not believe his eyes. He was delighted, on the one hand, but on the other, he did not want his only daughter to marry a woodcutter's serpent son. So this time he told him that he must have the serpent turn his entire castle into gold. When the serpent heard this news, he was exasperated at a king who would not keep his word. Still, he instructed his father to gather special herbs in the forest. These he should sweep into the castle. "If you do this and do it well, good fortune shall upon you dwell," he said. So the father gathered the herbs, and he swept these the length of the palace, and as he did, the castle turned into the purest, brightest imaginable gold. Now the king was thrilled that his castle was of gold, but he was alarmed by the thought of losing his daughter. He called the lovely girl to his side and told her of his situation and troubles. The princess was a beautiful girl, inside and out. "Father, I'll gladly marry the serpent who wishes to marry me and has given you so many riches," she said. The woodcutter hurried home to give his son the good news. The serpent was overjoyed. He kissed his parents. You have done your job so well. Good fortune will upon you, always, dwell, he said as he left the house and rushed to the palace. When the servants and the king and queen saw the serpent, they ran from his sight. Such an enormous and frightening creature terrified them. But sweet princess simply greeted him, curtsying low. My husband-to-be, welcome, she said softly. The moment the princess uttered these words, the serpent's skin split down from the back, and out of the serpent's skin stepped out a handsome young prince. You see, years before he had been put under a spell and curse that only the love of a beautiful princess could break. The princess and her serpent prince lived happily ever after, and just as the serpent had promised, his father and mother lived in good fortune for the rest of their lives. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Good night.